Now, as you can see, round 24 in the map is absolutely filled with, support Chinooks. Even so much that the game is starting to kind of jitter around a little bit. Something I've noticed that's happening a lot in the recent videos. Anyways, freezing the water just so that way it can fit a bit more heli pilots. Although my placement wasn't really ideal, I do think you can definitely fit a lot more than 2 little heli pilots in the little pond. But I didn't really bother too much with, perfect pixel perfect placement to where, I was able to optimize it. Look at my opponent's side, Teal Zebra definitely did do a lot better with the optimization of that, more than I did. But I mean, he ended up not opting to get absolute 0 at the little top there where I did, so he did have more space for heli pilots, I do believe. I did try fitting a spot for heli pilots where I put the villages that I end up selling. I wasn't able to fit that. Anyways, as you can see, money generation is absolutely insane and no problem. That's what I was talking about in the early game. Since we're going to be generating so much money, it's not going to come down to who can send the better rush. It literally is just going to come down to who can generate more money than the other. Having over 150k before round 26 is absolutely insane. I don't even think farm strategies generate this much before 26. So now that we've entered the 30s, both of us are just kind of slowly replacing our Chinooks with Apache Dart ships and Apache Primes. Just getting all the highest damage towers we can possibly get here, simply because figured, we're definitely not going to be rushing each other anytime soon. He is sending eco balloons. I'm assuming he's sending like pinks or purples. I feel like it is a bit too late to be sending that, just because if you do the math for efficiency, or if you just kind of looked at efficiency charts for pinks and purples, they are heavily inefficient and they're not really going to pay themselves off in time for it to kind of be worth it. So not really worth doing. But I guess he kind of figured that, he kind of realized that maybe, oh yeah, I do definitely need to generate a bit more money if I do want to eventually win this. So getting Marine kind of in the back just for as much damage as possible. But again, Marine's not really be doing too much. So fast forwarding a lot to round 39 is when the first bats start being sent out. I decided to send just a couple on his side just to see if it actually ends up doing anything. Newsflash, it ends up not actually doing anything. All you have to do really is just kind of activate Homeland and boom, the bat just gets instantly shredded. For round 39, that's absolutely insane. Ramping in Battles 2 is so much stronger than it is in BTD6. I'm not really sure what the equivalent of this would be, but I do assume it is pretty nutty. And as you can see, the game does get very jittery when going late game, so I don't actually really do this too often, as it's basically almost unwatchable. So we went past sudden death, and so now we're just kind of chilling here. He does send a F-Bat against me. I do have all 3 of my boosts as well as Homeland, so I figured that this was probably going to be an easy defend as well. I was kind of hesitant to send him an F-Bat on his side, as I wanted to kind of see what I was doing, how I was going to do against the F-Bat first before sending my own against him, just to make sure that he wasn't, that I wasn't kind of wasting my money. I ended up having to turn down the in-game audio for this portion just because the explosions, all the sounds were just so grating and just awful on the ears that I just could not end up listening to it. I did sell kind of a lot, not sell a lot. I did sell all my Chinooks here, so I do have to be careful as I do need to keep money just for being able to summary by Homeland. You see on my side, he ends up sending a lot of fortified bats. So just kind of, microwing Homeland, using the ability whenever it's active, and balloon boosting. Of course, I did send some bats back at him just to see if I could end up doing anything against him using the Marine ability. Basically just pulling out all of the abilities, upgrades, whatnot that I can to actually be able to defend this. I did use Homeland yet again. As you can see, even on round 42, bats still are getting shredded fairly well. Using another balloon boost on this side, but it's kind of a waste. It wasn't really going to do anything, as if you saw on my side and on his side, we're still shredding bats pretty easily. So this kind of had me a bit worried, being able to defend this and whatnot. If you do look at my money, I am starting to run them quite low, only 36k, which is really will only be enough to send one more F-Bat. So I wasn't really going to be able to do too much. Of course, I did have Marine around, so I was able to get some money utilizing special preparations, but it wasn't really looking too great. I'm not sure what the money is looking like on his side, but he probably doesn't have a whole lot of cash rolling around. So for both of us, I didn't really want to have to start selling Apache dart ships in order to like actually be able to afford money for rushing, as that left me vulnerable to rushing, of course. So of course I really try to want to end this quickly. It's like round 43 at this point. I'm thinking to myself, okay, this strategy can't last too much longer. Eventually it's gonna have to die to something. But like even still, you know, round 44, the battle on his side again still ended up popping pretty easily. Although he does have another fortified bat coming his way on round 44, completely untouched. So I was kind of hoping that, you know, maybe on round 44 the ramping would have gotten so strong that not even with the power of Homeland and Apache dart ships, as well as embrittlements, hopefully that would end up taking down this strategy. Alright, so it's round 46. The strategy is definitely running out of steam if you can look. Well, we're kind of running out of steam just because we don't have enough money at this point to really be able to afford rushing or be able to defend. If you look at my point, I only have like 2.3k. Definitely not enough to actually be able to afford or even do pretty much of anything. So at this point, I was just kind of wondering, okay, what am I going to do? How am I still going to beat him? Well, looking on his side, you know, that bat has got pretty far. And the ZOMG insides aren't looking too great either. Remember, bads as well as ZOMGs are also gaining increased HP. And so, you know, round 47 ticked over, so the ramping even kicked up for that ZOMG even more. He ends up using, you know, Snowstorm ability just because, if you know, he saw that, you know, the ZOMGs were getting incredibly far. But even then, it still does not look like it's enough in order to be able to take down those fortified ZOMGs. Thankfully, that ended up being the case, as again, I wasn't really sure what I was going to be able to do to beat this strategy. Kind of want to test this against something like Ninja Alk to see if this can actually survive longer than Ninja Alk. Anyways, for this next match, we're going to be playing my favorite strategy on my favorite map, being DFI on Sands of Time. I do think that Sands of Time is definitely my best map to be playing DFI on, although I am thinking of switching it up and trying to play maybe like Tac Ice Sniper on this map, as I do sort of believe that Tac Ice Sniper could probably do fairly well on this map. Thinking about it, for the middle section, you could definitely get Snowstorm, put like, you know, tac zones and overdrives in there. And I do think you would do pretty well with this strategy on this map, especially since you can stall a lot much better than you can on Oasis, which is by nature, the Oasis is very, very anti-stalled. So that does kind of end up being a bit of an issue. Bringing Smudge Cat as usual, simply just because I do think Smudge Cat is generally better than regular Zeely. Although I guess feel free to disagree in the comments below. He ends up bringing Gwendolyn, which is a very interesting play. Simply just because if he is going for Dartling Farm Ice, which I assume he is, you know, his ZOMG defense is going to be very, very messy. And it's not going to be pretty easy. So I do think, you know, Gwendolyn is probably a bit better for like early game, as you can just use Cocktail and Firestorm and all that. But you know, mid and late game is definitely a lot worse, simply just because you will have to pop the ZOMG down naturally instead of relying on Izzy's level 10 Hex. Fast forwarding quite a bit, as you guys have seen me play this strategy numerous of times, so I figure, you know, showing the, I guess, early rounds won't really be too interesting. But I guess, you know, you can see the effects of him having Gwendolyn. For Cocktail, for round 9, he only really had to use Cocktail in order to defend, you know, all those zebras. Whereas, of course, I had to spend a bit more money. So this does really kind of show he was able to get his plantation a lot way before I was. But I still was pulling out ahead in farms. I had a plantation, as well as having just 2 other 200 farms. He does send, you know, some regen purples. I just kind of end up boosting immediately, as I figured I can just wait for the cooldown, not for the cooldown. I can just wait for the 6 seconds, you know, for icicles to come back up. So that's really all I had to do there. And of course, if he re-rushes, well, I do have options in case he does decide to re-rush. So again, just kind of continue on with my normal farming path of, you know, just kind of going for yellows now. Alright, so still round 15, he decides to go for the regen Rainbow Rush of Death. Again, I am pretty confident. I just kind of end up boosting again, although I don't really think I need to, just kind of looking back. Definitely was a waste of a boost. You probably should have waited till 16 to send, you know, just kind of Group Ceramics, as Group Ceramics is definitely a rush that Darling Ice is very susceptible against. I do kind of get a base Ice Tower down just in case he does decide to send Group Ceramics. I can easily just kind of get an Ice Shards in case I need to. Round 18 comes along, he does send a F mob with, of course, Regen Rainbows underneath. This doesn't really do too much, just kind of getting an embrittlement down just to take care of the Regen Rainbows, as well as do a bit more damage to that F mob. and mostly just kind of slows down his farming, just because if you see, he is definitely behind on farming, so I guess this is kind of his attempt to sort of catch up. It does send more region rainbows underneath, but again, this does basically nothing. Very easy mob defense, you know, kind of using Dartling farm eyes, I find. So round 22, with the natural mob, he sends, you know, some BFBs. Again, this is pretty much a very easy defense, and definitely a time where you want to call for the legendary Dartling fan club. This is also a pretty easy defense, as you don't necessarily have to do too much. Getting a Hydro Rocket Pods as well as a Buckshot, because really it's just kind of ceramics that are really just kind of worrying me the most. As you can see there, those BFBs basically got melted, so again, you know, this does, I guess, make it mean we're tied in farms. I'm pretty much passive this whole game, but I decided to, you know, break that kind of passive streak, as I didn't really want to be going to round 30 with this strategy yet again. So again, just kind of sending some ZMGs on his side, just because, you know, since he doesn't have a Zeli, he can't use Hex in order to really break down that ZMG pretty easily. Of course, as soon as I get my central market, he just kind of ends up sending me a ZMG. Thankfully, I was able to just buy level 10 Hex for pretty cheap. So again, this defense isn't really too difficult. It's just kind of worrying about timing, as you know, normal Smudge Cat Zeli does only have 5 seconds of time where the Moab Hex, I guess, DOT effect is active. So if you activate it too early or too late before the 5-second timer is up, you kind of end up breaking down the shell. You kind of end up not breaking down the shell, but left with BFBs too easily. So that was pretty easy defense on his side. Over on the enemy side, he actually had to sell his central market, which is not good for him in the slightest, in order to afford that ZMG defense. So this really does show the difference between, you know, Gwendolyn and of course Heli Pilot. He ended up having to boost and use pretty much everything in order to defend a normal ZMG, so I was like, how in the world is he going to defend an FZMG? So that's a good question for him. And the good thing about Sands of Time is this map is so long that even if he sent another fortified ZMG over at me, I can again just wait for the Hex cooldown to come back up. He started selling farms just because I figured he realized that, oh, he's not going to defend this. But you know, him selling farms for an all-out was definitely a mistake on his part, simply just because I can sell farms to defend this pretty easy. All-outs on... ooh, voice crack there. But all-outs for against DFI isn't really a good idea, simply just because DFI defense for this is really easy. If you look here, I absolutely shredded those ZMGs as well as BFE. He even sent Rego Ceramics underneath, but that basically did nothing. I think he was just kind of better off playing long game and just kind of going late game to hopefully just kind of outplay me, which I guess he definitely could, as I don't have too much experience late game. But then again, you can see here, without Hex, Moab Hex, he definitely does struggle a lot against ZMGs, which does end up being his downfall. Of course, Gwendolyn, he might just not have his Zeli unlocked, which I guess is completely reasonable. Although he is in Hall of Masters, so I kind of doubt that. But yeah, that's it. If you enjoyed the video, you know, like, comment, subscribe, or join Discord. Link is down below in the description.